The handcuffs bit into Jamal Carter's wrists, cold steel grinding against skin still scarred from Fallujah. He stood tall, unyielding, as the cop's sneer burned hotter than the Georgia sun sinking behind the town square. A decorated Marine sniper, Jamal had faced death in deserts half a world away, but nothing prepared him for the humiliation of being shackled on American soil, his service weapon confiscated, his honor stripped by men who saw only his skin. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of outrage and fear, as Officer Brantley tightened the cuffs with a smirk, muttering, "You don't belong here, boy." Jamal's eyes, sharp from years of spotting targets through a scope, locked onto Brantley's. He didn't flinch, didn't beg. He'd survived ambushes, IEDs, and nights where the stars were his only witness to survival. But this was different. This was betrayal. He'd come home to Mill Creek, a speck of a town where he'd once been the high school track star, expecting a hero's welcome. Instead, he got suspicion, racial slurs hissed under breath, and now, this public spectacle. The call had come in an anonymous tip about a suspicious black man with a gun. That gun was his Marine-issued rifle, locked in his truck, legal and untouched. But to Brantley and his partner, Officer Hayes, it was enough to pin him as a threat. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your chest tighten. A small crowd had gathered, phones raised, capturing every second of the injustice. Jamal stood at the center, his camouflage fatigues still dusted with sand from his last deployment, his dog tags glinting faintly under the streetlights. He was 32, lean and hardened, his face a map of resilience. Brantley, a stocky man with a buzz cut and a chip on his shoulder, leaned in close. "You think you're some kind of war hero? Don't mean nothing here." His partner, Hayes, a younger officer with nervous eyes, said nothing but kept his hand on his holster, ready to escalate. Jamal's voice was low, steady, cutting through the haze. "I fought for this country. You gonna tell me that don't matter?" Brantley laughed, a sharp, ugly sound, and yanked Jamal toward the patrol car. The crowd gasped, a woman shouting, "He's a Marine. Let him go." But Brantley ignored her, his grip tightening. Jamal's mind raced not with fear, but with strategy. He'd been trained to stay calm under fire, to assess, to wait for the right moment. This wasn't Fallujah, but it was a battlefield all the same. The square was a snapshot of small-town America, a diner with flickering neon, a barbershop with faded stripes, a courthouse looming in the distance. But beneath the quaint facade, old wounds festered. Mill Creek had a history of racial tension, unspoken but ever-present, like a fault line waiting to crack. Jamal had known it growing up, felt it in the stares when he'd walk into certain stores, heard it in the whispers when he'd dated a white girl in high school. He'd left to serve, to prove he was more than their prejudice. Yet here he was, back where he started, reduced to a stereotype. A teenage girl in the crowd, her phone trembling in her hands, live-streamed the scene. "They're arresting a Marine for nothing," she yelled, her voice cracking with anger. Her words rippled through the onlookers, stirring murmurs of dissent. An older black man, his face lined with years of seeing too much, stepped forward. "Y'all know this ain't right. That's Jamal Carter. He's one of ours." But Brantley shot him a glare, and the man fell silent, his shoulders sagging under the weight of history. Jamal's thoughts drifted to his mother, who'd raised him alone after his father died in a mill accident. She'd be watching this on someone's phone by now, her heart breaking. He'd promised her he'd come home safe, not just from war, but from this town. He'd failed her on that second count. The cuffs were a physical weight, but the real burden was the betrayal off his service, his sacrifice, his very identity. He'd taken bullets for strangers, yet here, in his own country, he was the enemy. Brantley shoved him against the patrol car, the metal hot against Jamal's cheek. "You move, you're done," the officer growled. Jamal's jaw clenched, but he stayed still, his training holding him together. He scanned the crowd, reading their face sanger, fear, shame. A white woman in her 50s, clutching a grocery bag, looked away, unable to meet his eyes. A young black boy, no older than 10, stared wide-eyed, his fists balled. Jamal wanted to tell him, "Don't let this define you," but the words stayed locked in his throat. Then, A new sound cut through the chaos, a low, commanding voice from the edge of the square. "Stand down, officer." The crowd parted, heads turning. A man in a crisp Marine Corps dress uniform strode forward, his presence like a storm rolling in. 4 stars gleamed on his shoulders, a general's insignia that silenced the murmurs. General Marcus Tate, a legend in the Corps, a black man who'd climbed from enlisted to the highest ranks, stood tall and unyielding. His eyes, sharp as a blade, fixed on Brantley. "Who's in charge here?" Tate demanded, his voice carrying the weight of decades in command. Brantley faltered, his bravado crumbling. "2 am, sir," he stammered, suddenly aware of the phone's recording every word. Tate stepped closer, his gaze never leaving the officer. "You're detaining a decorated Marine based on what? A hunch?" "Atip." His voice was calm, but it carried the force of a grenade. Hayes, the younger officer, shifted uneasily, his hand dropping from his holster. Jamal's heart pounded, not from fear but from a flicker of hope. He knew Tate by reputation a mentor to countless black Marines, a man who'd faced his own battles with prejudice and won. Tate's presence was a lifeline, a reminder that not all heroes wore capes. Some wore stars. The general turned to Jamal, his expression softening for a moment. "Gunnery Sergeant Carter, you good?" Jamal nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, sir." Tate faced Brantley again, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "You've got 10 seconds to explain why you've got one of my best men in cuffs. And it better be good." The crowd held its breath, the tension so thick it could choke. Brantley opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time, he looked small, exposed, his authority unraveling under Tate's stare. The square felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Jamal stood straighter, the cuffs still biting, but his spirit unbroken. He'd faced worse odds and come out standing. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The silence in Mill Creek's town square was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of a distant car engine. Officer Brantley's face flushed red, his confidence eroding under General Tate's unrelenting gaze. The crowd, now swollen with onlookers drawn by the commotion, stood riveted, phones still recording, capturing a moment that felt like history unfolding. Jamal Carter, still handcuffed, felt the weight of every eye on him. But his focus was on Tate, the man who represented everything he'd fought for, everything he believed in despite the scars of war and prejudice. Brantley stammered, "We got a call, sir." Suspicious individual with a firearm. "Protocol." Tate cut him off, his voice like steel. "Protocol doesn't include humiliating a Marine who's served 3 tours for this country. You saw his uniform, his tags. You chose to ignore them." The general's words landed like blows, each one stripping away Brantley's flimsy excuses. Hayes, the younger officer, looked at the ground, his face a mix of shame and fear. He hadn't signed up for this, but he hadn't stopped it either. Tate turned to the crowd, his presence commanding their attention. "This man," he said, pointing to Jamal, "is Gunnery Sergeant Jamal Carter. He's taken out high-value targets in Iraq, saved countless lives, earned a Silver Star. And you," he locked eyes with Brantley, "dare to treat him like a criminal in his own hometown." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others whispering in agreement. The teenage girl, still live-streaming, shouted, "Tell him, General." Her voice sparked a ripple of courage among the onlookers. Brantley's hand twitched toward his radio, but Tate's next words froze him. "Uncuff him. Now." It wasn't a request. Brantley hesitated, his pride warring with the reality of the situation. The general's 4 stars weren't just rank, they were a symbol of authority he couldn't challenge, not with the world watching. Grudgingly, he pulled out the key and unlocked Jamal's cuffs, his hands shaking slightly. The metal fell away, and Jamal rubbed his wrists, his eyes never leaving Brantley's. Tate stepped closer to Jamal, placing a hand on his shoulder. "On behalf of the Marine Corps and this country, I apologize, son. This should never have happened." His voice was softer now, but it carried the weight of truth. Jamal nodded, his chest tight with emotion. He'd never expected Thesa 4-star general standing up for him in the middle of Mill Creek. turning the tables on his tormentors. The crowd erupted in cheers, a wave of relief and defiance washing over the square. But the moment wasn't just about Jamal. It was about every person who'd ever been judged by their skin, every injustice swept under the rug. The older black man who'd spoken earlier stepped forward again, his voice trembling but strong. "This town's got a long way to go, General. But thank you." Tate nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd, taking in the faces black, white, young, old. "Change starts here," he said. Today, Brantley and Hayes retreated to their patrol car, the weight of their actions sinking in. The crowd didn't disperse. Instead, they pressed closer, some offering Jamal words of support, others shaking Tate's hand. The teenage girl, still filming, approached Jamal. "I'm putting this everywhere," she said, her eyes fierce. "People need to see this." Jamal managed a small smile. "Do it, kid. Let him see." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the square, Tate pulled Jamal aside. "You're more than this moment, Carter," he said quietly. "Don't let it define you. You've got a future lead with it." Jamal nodded, the general's words sinking deep. He thought of his mother again, of the boy in the crowd, of the countless others who'd faced this same fight. He wasn't just a Marine. He was a symbol now, whether he wanted to be or not. The night settled over Mill Creek, but the energy in the square didn't fade. People lingered, talking, sharing stories of their own encounters with prejudice. The wooden signpost, with its bold handwritten note, "Justice tested in shadows," stood as a quiet testament to the day's events. Jamal glanced at it, then at Tate, who was speaking to a group of young black kids, telling them they could be anything, even a general. For the first time that day, Jamal felt a spark of hope not just for himself, but for the town, for the country. He walked toward his truck, his rifle still locked inside, untouched. The crowd parted for him, their cheers softer now, more respectful. He wasn't just the hometown kid anymore, or the Marine, or the man in cuffs. He was Jamal Carter, the man who'd stood tall when the world tried to bring him down. And as he drove away, the lights of Mill Creek fading in his rear view, he knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.